What if there existed a place, not to imprison people, but to completely erase them? In a small city in the hills of Austria, there were no records, no graves, and especially no escape. This wasn't just a Nazi camp. This was one of the most brutal Nazi camps ever designed, where death was inevitable. This is the story of the most brutal Nazi concentration camp in history. This is the story of Mauthausen. What if I told you Mauthausen wasn't designed for mass extermination like Auschwitz? It was something far more personal. Unlike the factory-like killing centers in Poland, Mauthausen was built to destroy people slowly, deliberately, face to face. The Nazis classified it as Category 3, their only camp with this rating, which meant extermination through labor. This wasn't about efficient genocide, it was about making suffering an art form. Construction began in August 1938, just months after Germany annexed Austria. The SS chose this remote location near Linz for two reasons no other camp had: a massive granite quarry and natural cliffs. The quarry wasn't just for labor, it was a built-in torture device. Prisoners would later call the site the bone mill, due to how quickly it ground men to dust through forced labor. The surrounding geography formed a natural prison, with 180-foot drops that guards used for impromptu executions. The first arrivals weren't Jewish civilians, but political enemies, socialists, communists, and intellectuals from Germany and Austria. By December 1938, the camp held nearly 1,000 prisoners, most wearing green triangles, marking them as criminal elements. The SS selected these early victims carefully. They needed educated men who could survey the land, design barracks, and organize slave labor, only to become that labor themselves once their skills were no longer useful. Camp architecture revealed its purpose. Unlike Auschwitz's sprawling flatland, Mauthausen perched on a hill with watchtowers covering every angle. The SS barracks sat higher than prisoner quarters, reinforcing dominance. Winter winds whipped through unheated stone buildings intentionally left exposed. Even the camp gate carried a chilling slogan, "Right or wrong, my country." This wasn't just a holding facility. Every detail engineered despair. SS records show quarry labor served dual purposes. While stones built Nazi projects across Austria, the work itself was calibrated to kill. Guards assigned prisoners impossible loads, 50 kilograms granite blocks strapped to wooden frames. The weight alone crushed spines within weeks. But the real horror lay in the stairs. 186 uneven stone steps prisoners climbed dozens of times daily. Rain made them slippery. Snow made them deadly. Guards kept logs noting how many prisoners collapsed per hour. Survivor testimonies describe newcomers' shock upon arrival. Unlike Auschwitz's selection ramps, Mauthausen's initiation involved being marched straight to the quarry edge. Guards would shout, "Look left!" before shoving prisoners off the cliff they called the parachute jump. Those who survived the fall were shot below. Others were forced to race up the stairs carrying stones until their hearts gave out. This was the camp's true purpose. Not just execution, but degradation first. The initial death rate tells the story. In Mauthausen's first year, over 25% of prisoners had died, compared to Auschwitz 2% during its early phase. SS reports bragged about working prisoners to the limit. Medical staff recorded deaths as heart failure regardless of cause. No gas chambers existed yet. Murder happened by boot, rock, and starvation, methods requiring perpetrators to watch their victims' final moments. When the US Army later found the quarry, they noted the steps wore grooves from thousands of dragging feet. But the names of those who made those marks, most were erased before they even arrived. The stairs of death weren't just steps, they were an instrument of torture disguised as manual labor. Each morning before dawn, prisoners lined up at the base of the quarry to strap wooden frames to their backs. Guards loaded these with granite blocks weighing exactly 110 pounds, calculated to break a man within weeks. Then began the climb. 186 uneven stone steps cut into the quarry wall, each one slightly too high to take comfortably while bearing weight. Prisoners made this trip 30 to 40 times daily until their bodies gave out. Rain turned the stairs into death traps. Survivor accounts describe how men's wooden clogs would slip on wet stone, sending both prisoner and stone tumbling downward. One fall could trigger domino collapses. SS records note incidents where 10 or more prisoners were crushed in single accidents. Guards didn't stop these chain reactions but timed them. Some even placed bets on how many men would be taken out in each collapse. The SS turned suffering into sport. New arrivals were often forced to run the stairs until they collapsed from cardiac strain. Guards called this race training. Others faced the parachute jump, where prisoners carrying rocks were shoved off the 180-foot cliff edge. Those who instinctively dropped their stones to break their fall were shot for sabotage. Those who kept holding them were crushed on impact. Commandant Franz Zerais later admitted the guards developed a point system, extra rations for whoever could make a prisoner hold his rock the longest during the fall. Architectural blueprints show the quarry's design amplified cruelty. The stairs wound along open cliff faces where prisoners could see fallen bodies below. Guards stationed themselves on elevated platforms to observe every grimace of pain. Unlike gas chambers that depersonalized killing, this method ensured executioners saw their victims' faces. One survivor recalled a guard who would shout, "Look at me!" before kicking prisoners off the edge, forcing eye contact in their final moments. Survivor testimonies reveal psychological torture beyond physical strain. Guards assigned prisoners to carry corpses up the stairs, sometimes their own friends. The dead often outweighed granite blocks, and climbers had to balance rigor mortis-stiffened limbs while ascending. Other times, prisoners were ordered to sing as they climbed. The SS particularly enjoyed making Jewish inmates perform German folk songs. Knowing a wrong note meant a bullet in the spine. By 1943, the steps had worn visible grooves from thousands of dragging feet. Prisoners called them the stone teeth, each groove representing someone who'd collapsed there. Yet the stairs kept claiming lives even when prisoners weren't being actively killed. Chronic malnutrition meant many simply sat down mid-climb and never got up again, heart muscles too weakened to continue. Guards called these natural deaths in their logs, ignoring how starvation was policy. American soldiers who liberated the camp found the stairs still covered in blood and fragments of bone. Some steps had cracked entirely from repeated pounding of falling bodies. Measuring the quarry's depth, one GI noted it resembled a stadium designed for spectators, not laborers. He was right. The stairs served no practical quarrying purpose. Their uneven spacing and dangerous angles actually slowed stone extraction. Every detail existed solely to maximize suffering. Records show a prisoner had a 50% chance of dying within 3 months of quarry duty. Yet oddly, some veterans of Auschwitz transferred to Mauthausen claimed this was worse. At least, gas chambers ended things quickly. Here, death came slowly, with guards making sure you saw it creeping up every time you looked at those endless stone steps. Why were Spanish Republicans and university professors among the first groups sent to Mauthausen? The answer reveals a chilling Nazi strategy that went beyond racial extermination. While Jews and Soviet POWs suffered brutally here, Mauthausen specifically targeted the people who shaped Europe's culture, the thinkers, leaders, and creators who could inspire resistance. The first wave included over 300 Spanish Republicans who had fled Franco's regime, only to be betrayed by Vichy France. These weren't just soldiers, they were journalists, professors, and union organizers. The SS singled them out because they represented the educated resistance that had fought fascism in Spain. By 1941, transports arrived carrying lawyers from Poland, doctors from Czechoslovakia, and artists from Germany, all arrested simply for their professions. Prisoner registration cards tell the story. The SS invented special categories like KLV, career criminal, for intellectuals, tagging them as threats not for their ethnicity but for their skills. A teacher from Lyon was marked dangerous, known to influence youth. A Warsaw surgeon was labeled subversive, possible organizer. These weren't arbitrary arrests. They were precise strikes against those who could rebuild their nations after Nazi rule. Recent research uncovered an unsettling fact. Many never appeared in records at all. Historians estimate 20% of Mauthausen's victims were never registered. Some were executed immediately upon arrival, others were given fake prisoner numbers that were recycled after their deaths. This wasn't just bureaucracy, it was systematic erasure. The Nazis didn't just want these people dead, they wanted them forgotten. Survivors later testified, about recognizing celebrities among the emaciated prisoners. A Belgian resistance member described seeing a famous French parliamentarian hauling stones. A Polish professor recognized his own university rector in the quarry lines before the man collapsed. Even among the anonymous striped uniforms, reputations lingered, which made them targets. Guards took special pleasure in humiliating well-known figures, forcing judges to clean latrines or making opera singers perform naked. The methods went beyond labor. Medical records show doctors intentionally infected educated prisoners with tuberculosis to study its progression. Lawyers were assigned to pointless translation tasks, transcribing German laws into languages they didn't know until starvation weakened their minds. One survivor recalled SS officers holding intelligence tests, where prisoners solved math problems, only to be shot when they succeeded, proving their dangerous intellect. What made Mauthausen unique wasn't just the cruelty, but the selection. At Auschwitz, death often came randomly based on arrival numbers. Here, they identified specific people who represented knowledge itself. A 1943 transport from the Netherlands included librarians, archivists, and 2 Nobel Prize nominees, not because they were Jewish, many weren't, but because they preserved culture. The gas chamber here operated differently too. Unlike Auschwitz's industrial killing, Mauthausen's was used in small batches, often for groups of teachers or scientists. Guards called it the brain drain. Records show one August night when they executed 47 French university staff together, not with Zyklon B, but by forcing them to stand naked in freezing water until their hearts stopped. This was Hitler's backup plan for domination. If military victory failed, at least Europe's memory could be dismantled. By 1944, train schedules show regular shipments of educators from occupied territories, sometimes entire school faculties at once. They weren't just killing people, they were burning libraries, one librarian at a time. The medical block at Mauthausen looked like a normal hospital from the outside. Inside, it was a laboratory for torture disguised as science. While Auschwitz had Josef Mengele, Mauthausen had Dr. Eduard Krebsbach, a man who personally executed over 900 prisoners by cardiac injections he called mercy killings. His associates conducted experiments that turned medicine into a weapon. Prisoners became test subjects without consent or anesthesia. One common procedure involved injecting phenol directly into prisoners' hearts while fully conscious. Doctors timed how long it took for the victims to die, usually 15-20 seconds of agonizing convulsions. The medical reason? Developing faster execution methods for the SS. Other experiments involved amputating healthy limbs just to practice surgical techniques. Survivors reported seeing piles of severed arms and legs outside the operating block, sometimes still twitching. Cold weather experiments were particularly brutal. Prisoners were forced to stand naked in freezing water for hours while doctors measured their plunging body temperatures. Some were then thrown into vats of near-boiling water to revive them, peeling off their own skin in the process. Others had their limbs frozen solid before doctors attempted to thaw them with infrared lamps. Medical logs show meticulous notes on how long each subject screamed before losing consciousness. The poison experiments followed a sickening routine. Prisoners were given injections or pills containing unknown substances, then monitored for reactions. Some collapsed foaming at the mouth within minutes. Others endured days of internal bleeding before dying. Doctors kept detailed charts tracking each victim's decline, not to find cures, but to refine dosages. SS pharmacist Eric Wasicki later admitted they tested 5 different poisons this way, searching for the most efficient option. Even basic medical care became lethal. Prisoners reporting illness were often given saltwater injections instead of medicine, a guaranteed death sentence through kidney failure. Those with tuberculosis were deliberately crowded into special barracks to accelerate infection rates. When the camp's small gas chamber operated, doctors sometimes stood outside with stopwatches, comparing death speeds between groups. Perhaps most disturbing were the documentation rituals. Prisoners scheduled for execution were forced to sign suicide declarations beforehand. Staff photographers took clinical before and after shots of experimental subjects, posing emaciated victims next to their formerly healthy mugshots. Everything was recorded, but not for medical advancement. The files were proof of how thoroughly science could be perverted. The scale was systematic. Over 24 SS doctors rotated through Mauthausen, each adding their own research specialties. One focused on gangrene, intentionally infecting wounds to observe progression. Another studied starvation by measuring exactly how little food a body needed before organ failure. When Allied investigators later found these records, they noted the chilling precision, columns of numbers representing screams no one had recorded. What separated these atrocities from random violence was their clinical detachment. Guards beat prisoners in rage, doctors killed them with charts and clipboards. Survivor Michel Hollard later testified about watching a doctor calmly eat lunch while prisoners bled out on his operating table. The man paused only to wipe gravy off his notes. This was medicine inverted, where healing became harming, data meant suffering, and every white coat concealed a killer. After liberation, investigators found stockpiles of human organs stored in formaldehyde, each labeled with prisoner numbers instead of names. The message was clear. Here, people were specimens first, corpses second, and humans never. If this is opening your eyes to a part of history rarely talked about, take a second to like the video, subscribe, and turn on notifications. It's a small click, but it helps keep these hidden stories from being buried again. What happens when survival requires betraying your own people? At Mauthausen, the SS engineered this exact dilemma through the Kapos system. Prisoners forced to police other prisoners. These weren't volunteers, but men selected for their physical strength or criminal backgrounds, given a simple choice: enforce Nazi rules or join the doomed. The privileges were brutally straightforward. Kapos received extra bread rations, sometimes double portions. They slept in separate barracks with blankets. Most importantly, they avoided the quarry. But the price was higher than the SS admitted up front. A Polish survivor recalled his Kapo initiation, being handed a club and ordered to beat an elderly prisoner until the man's ribs cracked. Guards timed these sessions, rewarding the most vicious strikes with cigarettes. Psychological studies later showed how cunning this system operated. Prisoners reported distrusting fellow inmates more than guards, never knowing who might report them for extra food. Kapos controlled who got work details indoors or outdoor, often sentencing rivals to lethal cold. One French survivor described hospital Kapos, who decided which sick prisoners got medicine versus who was left to die. These weren't just jobs, they were daily moral calculations where compassion could mean starvation. Yet some Kapos secretly resisted. A Czech electrician turned Kapo saved lives by accidentally leaving wire cutters near fences. Others developed code phrases like "Block 5 needs cleaning" to warn of impending SS inspections. Records show several Kapos were executed for such sabotage, their replacements always eager to prove loyalty through increased brutality against the remaining prisoners. Post-war trials exposed the system's impossible contradictions. Former Kapo Hans B. testified he selected weaker prisoners for death transports because guards threatened his family still in Berlin. Another described organizing work slowdowns that got him demoted back to quarry duty, where he nearly died. Judges struggled to separate victims from collaborators when the same person could be both. The SS designed this moral maze carefully. Guards staged competitions between Kapos, pitting German criminals against Polish intellectuals to deepen divisions. Some Kapos developed reputations like Red Johann, who beat prisoners senseless at roll call, or Silent Piotr, who distributed stolen turnips after dark. Both were trapped in the same system, only their coping methods differed. Survivor accounts reveal the deepest wounds weren't physical. A Dutch painter described recognizing his former university classmate as a Kapo, watching him turn away to avoid acknowledging their past friendship. Another recalled Kapos being forced to execute their own relatives to prove loyalty. The real horror wasn't just that men broke under pressure, but that Nazis made breaking others a condition for staying alive. Perhaps the most telling detail emerges from punishment records. Kapos who refused orders weren't immediately killed, they were returned to the general population wearing special markings. Former comrades often murdered them first, blaming the messengers more than the system. This was Nazi psychological warfare at its most effective, making victims perpetuate their own oppression long after the guards walked away. When American troops liberated Mauthausen, they struggled to process what survivor Primo Levi later called the gray zone, moral choices made in impossible circumstances. Some Kapos hung themselves with their own uniform belts rather than face judgment. Others gathered food for the dying. All carried haunted expressions that showed no one escaped the Kapos system unscathed, not even those who survived it. When American tanks rolled into Mauthausen on May 5, 1945, soldiers expected to find another Auschwitz-style killing center. Instead, they discovered something that unsettled them in a different way. Where industrialized camps had efficient gas chambers, here they found prisoners still hand-chiseling memorial stones for dead SS officers. The 11th Armored Division's reports noted confusion. This wasn't the mechanized horror they'd prepared for, but something more disturbingly personal. Austria's post-war denial helped bury Mauthausen's memory. The country promoted itself as Hitler's first victim, downplaying that Austrian SS guards ran this camp. While Auschwitz became shorthand for Nazi evil, Mauthausen faded because its cruelty didn't fit the narrative. There were no train tracks leading to gas chambers here, just that infamous quarry where men died one painful step at a time. This made it harder to explain than industrial genocide. Justice largely skipped Mauthausen's perpetrators. Only 61 staff faced trial at Dachau in 1946, a fraction of those who served here. Commander Franz Zereis escaped and was shot while resisting arrest, dying before revealing his full knowledge. Many guards simply walked home, including Dr. Eduard Krebsbach, who murdered hundreds with phenol injections. He practiced medicine in Germany until 1947, when survivors finally recognized him at a bus stop. The Spanish Republicans imprisoned here became unexpected archivists of horror. Knowing they might not survive, they secretly photographed camp life at incredible risk. One prisoner hid a camera lens in his hollowed-out shoe. Another smuggled film in a false-bottomed food bowl. Local Austrian woman Anna Pointner concealed their photos under her chicken coop until liberation. These images later became key evidence, showing details no Nazi document recorded, like the exact way prisoners carried stones up the stairs. Survivors found little comfort after liberation. Many returned to countries that didn't want to hear their stories. A Dutch survivor recalled neighbors dismissing his experience because Auschwitz was worse. Others found their homes occupied by people who claimed they'd disappeared voluntarily. The intimate nature of Mauthausen's violence, face-to-face beatings rather than impersonal gas, made their suffering harder for outsiders to comprehend. Recent archaeological work reveals how much was ignored. Ground-penetrating radar located mass graves still unmarked in the 1990s. Builders digging near the camp in 2005 accidentally uncovered a pit containing 360 bodies, victims hastily buried as Allied forces approached. These discoveries prove how thoroughly Austria tried to move on without fully confronting its past. What makes Mauthausen's legacy complicated is precisely what makes it essential. At Auschwitz, death came factory-style, anonymous, and efficient. Here, killers looked victims in the eye. Guards knew prisoners by number, by face, sometimes even by reputation. This personalized sadism forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth. The Holocaust wasn't just about industrial scale, but about humans choosing cruelty. The photos those Spanish Republicans risked everything to take show something revealing about memory. Many depict not just suffering but resistance, prisoners secretly celebrating holidays, sharing extra food, teaching each other languages. Even in this place designed to erase humanity, people found ways to remain human. That's why Mauthausen can't be forgotten, not just for how people died there, but for how they lived. Mauthausen forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth. The Holocaust wasn't just about industrial killing, it was about guards who knew prisoners by name before breaking them. It was doctors recording heart rates during torture. It was Kapos forced to choose between survival and morality. Now we want to hear from you. Had you ever heard of this camp before? Drop a comment below and let us know what shocked you most.